John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com, covers the NFL nationally for GetMoreSports.com and the Eagles for our website, 97.3 ESPN.com. And one of the things, we talked about earlier in the show, how the Warriors are both good and bad for the NBA. Today we're going to talk about the Patriots, who have a similar kind of thing going for them, although the Warriors just win every championship, it seems like. The Patriots just get there most of the time. But the Patriots are who we're going to focus on today in just a bit with John McMullen here on the Sports Bash. Johnny Mac, what's up, man?
How you doing, Mike?
Mr. Negative, it's good to hear from you.
People hear what they want to hear.
Sure is the case. We got a lot to dive into on this Patriots team. We saved them for last, obviously, because they're the team that the Eagles faced when they made it to the Super Bowl. But before we get to them, there's some other things that we want to get to. How about Nick Foles, number one jersey sales, merchandise sales, not just jersey sales. This is all merchandise in general. But number one in the league from March to May or something to that effect, but still ahead of Tom Brady. And the fact that Carson Wentz, who hasn't played since December, was on number 3 on that list. I don't know what that kind of says for where the league is. We talk about Mike Trout in baseball, and they're saying, well, he needs to do more. I can't imagine that Nick Foles and Carson Wentz are the two of the 3 most popular guys in the entire league.
No, it tells you what the Super Bowl does, basically. If you look at the top 50 list, which I just retweeted from the NFLPA, it's filled with Eagles. Who knew? It's a big deal for these people that the Eagles won the Super Bowl, and they're buying merchandise. So, it means a lot. I mean, that's what success is, and people are fired up about this team and the organization and the people that finally got him over the hump. And Nick Foles as the quarterback of the Super Bowl champions, I've said it for months. He'll always be a star in this town. He'll never have to buy a drink in this town. He doesn't drink, but if he did, he would never have to buy one. The people love him, and he's the backup. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I don't know that there's ever been a backup quarterback at the number 1 spot on any merchandising list.
No, I don't know how long they've been doing it. If you can go back to when the Giants won with Hostetler, I don't think they were doing it back then. But it's obviously very rare. And you need a couple things. You need that success, and you need also a market that is football crazy. Obviously, football is popular all over, no matter what team wins the Super Bowl. But we all know there's certain markets, and Philadelphia is one of them, that are just football crazy.
No doubt. And Tom Brady was number 2 on that list. Saquon Barkley came in at number 3. We saw other interesting names like Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott, names that you would think, but I thought there would be more of the wide receiver guys like Julio Jones, Antonio Brown. I was surprised with a lot of about 4 of the names on that list. Derek Carr, I was a little surprised with him. I was a little surprised at some of the names on that list.
Well, it's always quarterbacks, obviously, and also new teams tend to give players a bump. I know LeGarrette Blount, believe it or not, was 49, I believe, which is kind of sort of truncated from the Eagles and now being on a new team in Detroit. So, it's always certain things, and if a high-profile name changes teams or wins, generally they're going to be at the top of the list. And then you have the iconic people like Tom Brady.
John, you got Tom Brady. We're going to be talking about the Patriots, kind of a little extended look at the Patriots today. Let's start with Brady. You see any signs of slowing down?
Not in February in Minneapolis. He's going to be 41 in August. I always point to Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning was throwing for 55 touchdowns and winning the MVP award in this league, and 2 years later was physically shot. So when it does happen, it's going to happen very, very quickly. And he's going to be 41 in August. It could start at any time. But back in February, he was throwing for 500 yards against a really good defense that had dominated throughout the playoffs up to that point. And the Eagles really had no answer until Brandon Graham finally got to him. So I haven't seen any sign of slipping just yet.
How many more years, realistically, do you see that he plays and can play at the level that would be acceptable? I mean, do you see him hanging on playing when he's unable to, be Tom Brady?
Well, he's talked about mid-40s. I wouldn't think he would want to stick around if he turned into a mediocre quarterback. I mean, he's used to having success. He's the MVP of this league. I don't think he wants to stick around with an 80 passer rating. He's got, obviously, other things in his life. He's made a ton of money. There's no need to it. So, no, I don't think he's one of those guys that will be hanging on. But he hasn't seen any slipping in his game. And as I said, it's evidenced by that MVP award and the numbers and what he was able to do in the Super Bowl. So right now it's all systems go with Tom Brady.
It's crazy. I mean, and all of the different weapons that he has gone through. You talk about consistency and having the same guys. I mean, he seemingly is going through guys. Amendola's out. He still has Edelman. They brought in Patterson. Hogan is back. They brought Britt, Dorsett. Jordan Matthews is there. It's not like he's got this, a Hall of Fame group that he's been working with. Aside from Randy Moss, he's really had a bunch of just guys out there.
No, and that's why I call this the greatest run in football history, the Brady-Belichick Patriots, because not only the length, not only the success, but also in the era they did it. I always talk about, when you talk about great teams, whether it was the Steelers, the Terry Bradshaw Steelers, you could get a core group together. There was no free agency. You would have them for 10 years. There's constant change in the modern NFL. And you just mentioned Randy Moss, unquestionably the best receiver Tom Brady ever had. Randy Moss is going into the Hall of Fame really quickly, coming up. That means, obviously, first ballot guy. In my opinion, the second best receiver that ever lived. However, that means he's been out of the game for 5 years. And Tom Brady's still going, and he's still performing at that kind of level. And he's got weapons. Rob Gronkowski's one of the best tight ends that have ever played this game. Julian Edelman's a great slot receiver. He'll be suspended, obviously, at the outset of the season. But it's not wow off your page. You're talking about Chris Hogan now. You're talking about Jordan Matthews is there now. You're talking about Kenny Britt. And he'll make them look good. There's no doubt in my mind he'll make them look good.
I don't disagree with you there. If Brady's still the trigger man, Edelman's going to, be a top flight guy. Hogan had a great, I say great. He was very good last year until he kind of got banged up. He had some weird shoulder problem there. The running back situation, too. It's not like he's got Barry Sanders or Le'Veon Bell back there. He's got a rookie this year in Sony Michel, Rex Burkhead, James White, Mike Gillislee, Brandon Bolden. These are all guys who, on most teams, would probably be third down backs.
Yeah, I mean, they do that committee approach that the Eagles have embraced, and they've sort of one of those teams that have devalued the position. We talked about LeGarrette Blount. He had 18 touchdowns there. They just let him walk, and they just insert people. And it might be Burkhead on a particular play. It might be James White. Deion Lewis is gone, but they got Jeremy Hill. They still have Mike Gillislee. They have a ton of guys who can do it on a week-to-week basis. And sometimes, Jim Schwartz talked about that to me at the Super Bowl. Sometimes it's really difficult sort of playing where's Waldo, especially if you guys who do different things. So it can work both ways. Say if Jeremy Hill's out there, you kind of know maybe they want to run the ball. And if James White is out there, maybe they want to throw it. But you also have to have defenders who can identify the running back that's in the game and realize what they do well. And sometimes that's not as easy as it seems.
Yeah. It's amazing. And obviously Gronkowski's a big part of this team, and he's getting up there too. I mean, when you look at that offense, it's so bizarre to say that this is the team everybody fears, and it's just a tribute to how great Brady is. And I mean, you go in with that offense and you're any other franchise, you're not having playoff aspirations.
No, yeah, if you have those skill people outside Gronkowski, as you mentioned, and you have an average quarterback, you're probably not thinking about the playoffs. And remember, they also lost their left tackle, Nate Solder, in free agency, so they have to replace him. Adrian Waddle is the leader in the clubhouse, so they don't look as good there. But I think we all know they're going to find ways to move the football.
John, you look at their offensive line, it's another situation where you look at that line sometimes, what do you think we say offensively let them down last year? They went up and down the field in that Super Bowl, essentially, except for the last drive, and, Brandon Graham finally got there. But is the offensive line a weakness for them, or is that the area where we don't know, we don't give them enough credit for?
It's getting better. I think it was better last year than the year before when they actually won the Super Bowl. So, I mean, but now Solder's gone, so I think they've taken a step back. He's not a great left tackle, but he's above average, and he was certainly the biggest name they have. But interior-wise, David Andrews has started to develop at center, and Shaq Mason and Joe Thuney at guard. They're not stars, but they're solid. So I think their biggest issue is tackle. Just replacing a guy like Solder, it's not easy.
Defensively, they didn't make very many stops in that Super Bowl. And
now, did you see Jason Kelsey's quote?
I was just going to say, Jason Kelsey came out today and essentially said, well, their defensive line stinks. I mean, for all their defensive talent, not their defensive line so much. But, a combination. Kelsey said the last defense we've seen was Minnesota, where we were like, those dudes got some players. I guess he's saying that those players, the Super Bowl runners-up, do not have the players.
And he said they saw the Patriots and they said those dudes got some coaches, and that pretty much sums it up. Yeah, they don't have a ton of talent. I talked about it all last year with you on the front seven specifically. Secondary is not bad. It's not bad at all. There's not a lot of depth, but the guys who play, Stephon Gilmore, Devin McCourty, his brothers now there, Jason McCourty, Duron Harmon, even Patrick Chung, the ex-Eagle, they're solid on the back end. But the front seven was just, especially when Dante Hightower went out, there was just nothing in the front seven. Now, he'll be back, so that's a big improvement. And they brought in Adrian Claiborne, who had 9.5 sacks, and they're hopeful. But remember, he had 6 of those sacks in the one game when the Cowboys lost Teron Smith, and they couldn't block him. If Teron Smith's in that game, 6 turns to 0. So it's not exactly like Adrian Claiborne is this dominating pass rusher, and they're expecting him to come in and be an edge rusher to complement Trey Flowers. And, as Jason Kelsey said, they got some good coaches.
Okay, well, they lost the defensive coordinator, obviously, went to Detroit. He's the new head coach there. Or does that not matter? It's all Belichick running the defense.
No, yeah, it's Belichick's defense. But Matt Patricia's a very good coach. They didn't name a defensive coordinator. So obviously it's Bill's defense. That's his expertise. That's what he's known for. So it's not that big of a deal. And we all know the history of his assistants trying to go on to be head coaches generally doesn't turn out that well, because a lot of people think the reason there is success on that assistant coaching staff, as opposed to somebody like Andy Reid, is because of the head coach and not necessarily how good the assistants are. I kind of lean towards that. I mean, Belichick is probably the best coach in the history of this game, and as I said, history proves those assistants haven't done all that well.
Yeah, and we will get into that in a little bit. I want to continue to kind of look on their defensive side of the ball, because do you look at this defense, McCourty in the secondary, with Gilmore, who they brought over, the two McCourties, by the way, Eric Rowe, former Eagle out there, Patrick Chung. I mean, I read these names off, and Van Noy, Hightower. Is this defense? Their defense gave them problems in the beginning of last year, and they kind of tightened the screws up. But is their defense falling off a little bit?
Well, I think actually it got a little bit better talent-wise because they were one who's at least a decent player and a veteran guy. He's proven, understands how to play, and Hightower's back. I mean, Hightower is their best front seven player by far, by leaps and bounds, and he had a lot of injury issues last season, wasn't around much, had a torn pec, had some knee issues as well. So he's by far their best player on the defensive side of the ball, and he'll be back. So that helps. But it's a group that sort of Bill Belichick is going to be putting together with fishing line and mirrors and everything like he usually does.
It's crazy. I mean, you take Brady and Belichick away from that team, what are they?
They're not good. They're probably a 3-4 win team.
Wow, a 3-4 win team.
Difference. Yeah, that's the difference. But you're talking about what I believe is the greatest coach in the history of the NFL and the greatest quarterback in the history. And great quarterbacks, I think great players in every sport are defined by making others around them better. And you mentioned earlier Moss. I talked about him a little bit. Other than Moss, think about the receivers and think about the guys he made. You know, we talk about Julian Edelman as like a star. Think about where he came from. Think about what he was entering this league from Kent State as a former quarterback, as a seventh-round pick. Think about Danny Amendola when he was there. Think about Chris Hogan, who's nothing in Buffalo, and all of a sudden he's making big plays. And I think Jordan Matthews, if he can stay healthy, I think people are going to look at Jordan Matthews and go, wow, he can really play.
Right.
And, you know, we all know from watching Jordan, great guy, but he's got some significant limitations. He's not the fastest guy in the world. And you saw the difference putting somebody with some far more athleticism in the slot, Nelson Aguilar, who took off last season. But Jordan's going to be a star there if he's healthy. That's just what he does. Aaron Rodgers does the same thing with those Green Bay receivers.
Yeah, I look at Matthews there and think, it was interesting though, a slot guy, and most of the Brady slots have been these like undersized kind of quick guys.
Yeah, it has been. I mean, you think go back to Wes Welker, Edelman, Amendola, but they'll play him outside the numbers, and they'll find ways to get him the football. Maybe we'll play in the slot early as Edelman is on suspension. But ultimately, I think he'll end out outside, and they'll mix and match. As I said, they got Chris Hogan, they got Kenny Britt, they got Malcolm Mitchell. They're not obviously great receivers, but they're all NFL receivers. They're all competent, and Brady just makes them better.
Yeah. It's amazing, as you mentioned. You know, Brady. What's he? 41 now.
He'll be 41 in August. So real quick.
41 in August, which means, holy moly, he's him and how many years have been Belichick now? 19 is this?
I would have to look it up.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean it's been about 2 decades of dominance, and really.
I mean, when we're talking about this team here, I'm just thinking to myself, like, you know, when you said he's 41, I'm thinking I'm 41, trying to think back of when he started and thinking there hasn't been a season in my post-college life that the Patriots didn't enter with you thinking they're the best.
Well, and I always say, I mean, they're one of those teams where they play every week and they think they're going to win. And it really harkens down to the quarterback.
How many more years do you think Belichick wants to coach? Like we always ask about Brady,
I think I talked about this at the Super Bowl a little bit. I think there's something to the fact there was this story that broke when they're talking about Malcolm Butler's gone and in Tennessee now. about him sort of starting to get a little bit upset about this new generation of players and about how they learn and about, always looking at the cell phone, always worried about social media, always worried about different things. And that's one of the reasons I think the Eagles won the Super Bowl, wrote about it on 973ESPN.com. I think that's the strength of Doug Peterson as a coach. It's not the aggressiveness, it's his communication and his ability to reach people. I think Belichick is tiring of that, and that was the report coming out of Boston. I think there's something to it, and I think he might decide to walk away when Tom Brady says, you know what, I'm not going to play anymore right? If the slippage starts. Yeah, because I don't think he certainly doesn't want to go through a rebuilding period. Now, maybe if the timing worked and Tom was ready to retire and he can go directly into Jimmy Garoppolo, he would have thought about it, but the timing didn't work.
Yeah. That's crazy, and it's almost like the Popovich thing in San Antonio, where it's almost like it feels like they took DeRozan just so that they could stay competitive because Popovich doesn't want to be a part of building back from the ground up.
Well, yeah, and it's tough for guys like that. I mean, if you've been through a run of success like Bill Belichick or Pop for that matter, yeah, I mean, you don't want to go through what Brett Brown went through, certainly. And the comparison's not, it's apples and oranges because there's so much more parity in the NFL. You can rebuild quickly in the NFL if you make the proper personnel decisions.
Oh, I would never advocate throwing an NFL season away like that.
Yeah, and you can get real good real quick.
Sure.
That's evidence of that. People sniping at me because I didn't call the Eagles Super Bowl champions last training camp. Point to me somebody who did. Point to me somebody who thought the Eagles were going to make a run at the Super Bowl. I at least said if everything went right, they had a chance to be a playoff team because I had a lot of confidence in Doug Peterson, which, as you know, Mike, not a lot of people did.
No, I agree. Look, the Eagles, and I actually broke it down to this effect. I'll break the fourth wall a little here. We have ratings in the fall, and we were talking about them today, and somebody said, oh, you must have done really well with the Eagles, and I said, well, not necessarily because not that we did bad. It just we didn't hit a grand slam home run because of the Eagles because people didn't believe in the Eagles almost until I don't even know when. I mean, even when they were – because when Carson Wentz got hurt, everybody was down on the Eagles. But you didn't really believe in them, and I'm not saying believe in them. You thought the team was good. You thought they were fun. You thought it was exciting. But I don't think people thought they were a Super Bowl contender, even with Wentz. And then when Wentz went down, it was this team's not winning the Super Bowl. So there was really there wasn't really ever an apex moment of the season where you really said this team is going to win the Super Bowl.
Well, we started to figure out this was a really good team when Carson was healthy. I mean, we all thought the season was over. I'm not gonna lie with you. I think people in the NovaCare complex thought the season was over. To be honest with you, on December 11th, after Carson's injury, but I'm going all the way back to training camp. I remember we were having those conversations about the open practices. And there were 25,000 people there. And it wasn't as much as a normal year. And there wasn't that buzz about the Eagles coming into the season. And it was all directed at one guy. Nobody believed in Doug Peterson. They all thought he was a moron. They all thought he was an idiot. They all thought he wasn't ready for this job. And I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination I thought he was going to win the Super Bowl, because I didn't. I just thought it was unfair. And then things obviously took off. And now those same practices, there's going to be, I don't know, I didn't confirm. I meant to confirm. I don't know if they gave tickets out for the whole stadium. I assume they did. And if they did, there's going to be 70,000 people there.
Right. Unbelievable. When's it start? This time next week, right?
Yeah, next Thursday, first practice.
All right, John's got the previews for all the positions up at 97.3ESPN.com. We will dive into them next week, leading you into Eagles training camp, which gets underway here on the Sports Bash. John, enjoy your night, pal.
You too, Mike.